Right, we are recording, so let's get started. So, hi everyone, welcome to QA Beginners Club. I don't know what event we're up to now. I wouldn't even like to try and guess, but I would imagine we've had many. Hopefully it's not going to be too long now, touch wood, everything goes to plan, that we can actually start to get back in person. So I'll just quickly run through the code of conduct, just because I think we do have someone potentially new to the event. It's just useful for everyone to know. So we really pride ourselves on being a safe space. We want to be an environment where people enjoy coming to the meetups. They don't feel any pressure or any hostility. I know not every event out there, unfortunately, is like that. It is a free event. It always will be a free event. We may possibly from time to time have sponsors, but as a general rule, it is pretty much always going to be just kind of myself and Chris and Ken that are running this event. It's not really affiliated to any particular company. Everyone is welcome, so that's everyone, whether you're in testing already, wanting to get in testing, you've been in testing 10 years, or maybe you're even a dev, God forbid, you are also welcome. Obviously it goes without saying, but please do be respectful to others at the event and on any of our affiliated channels as well, such as Slack. Report anything that made you feel uncomfortable, however small it may be, to myself, Chris or Ken. That would probably be the best people to reach out to. And we've never had to do this, but obviously breaking these rules will lead to banning from future events, just because we hate to kind of compromise the safe space that we've got going on here. So we've got a really, really good event ahead of us this evening, of changing up the format a little bit really. We've actually got 2 guest speakers this evening, which is really exciting. So we're going to be starting off first of all with Ady, a little bit of a bio here for Ady. But he is a man of wearing many different hats, and I'm sure he'll go into that a little bit more, but at his core, he's someone that's really passionate about accessibility and exploring and, of course, testing. He does blog and he is active on Twitter, so check out both of his blogs and do follow him on Twitter as well. There's a real mix on there. I do follow him from, you know, testing professional tweets to others, so please do check that out. I am going to stop screen sharing now and try and hand over to yourself, Ady. Let's see if this is going to work. Let's have a look. Make host. Right, you should be able to share your screen now. Do you want to see if that will work?
Yeah, let me see. Chrome tab, share. You should now be able to see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Awesome. So, hello everybody. I'm Ady Stokes. Thank you for that introduction, Gabby. So, I was asked to talk about how I got into testing and then became an accessibility specialist. So that's a bit odd for me because I've never been asked to really talk about myself. Before. I have mentioned my journey and how I don't really have a tech background, to a software bootcamp that I helped run and create, but I've never really focused on myself. So as you can see, I'm age 54 and 7/8. My birthday is the 7th of June, so that's probably more like 1920th or something like that. But I've been around a long time, and I didn't really get into testing until early 2000s. So I've had a bit of a varied career, so I'll give you a little potted tour of all the things I've done. If somebody asked me to describe how my career had gone, I would say it's a bit like that picture on the screen of all the squiggles in the little box, because I've gone from here to there and round and back again and round in circles. And if anybody tells you that careers are very much a linear line of going up and taking steps or box steps up, I'm yet to meet someone who's done that all the way through. So, in the beginning, I was a bit clueless. I had no idea what I wanted to do when I was at school. I was a bit bored in school and I was basically ignored. We didn't really have career teachers. We had one session in all the time I was at school, and the career person said to me, "What sort of manual job do I want?" Because in the very early 80s, when I was finishing my schooling, there wasn't a lot of attention to the broad spectrum of people and what they might want to do. well, the school I went to, you either went into a manual job or some sort of service work, restaurants and waitressing and all those sorts of things, hospitality. So there wasn't really a lot of options given to me. I did do a City and Guilds in vocational preparation, which sounds the most awesome qualification I actually have. But it was a year of doing really weird things, like trying stuff out for 2 weeks at a time. Like we stripped some furniture and we went to a pool hall for an afternoon and played pool. I have no idea what I was supposed to get out of that. It did allow me to try lots of things, but there weren't really anything to do that interested you in work. So it was just a wasted year of nonsense, really. So when I'd finished school, I took the first job I got. And it was boring and manual. So I moved, and then I did another boring and manual job. And then I moved again. And anybody who'd offer me a few extra quid for my services for the week got me, because it was just boring. I had no responsibility and not a lot of efforts. That was until I got to a place that let me play with forklift trucks and wagons. So I was a professional wagon driver for about 5 years. And learned how to drive many different forklift trucks, including ones that took the cab massively in the air for about 50, 60 feet in the air. That was my most fun forklift that I've ever driven. But yeah, it was more interesting because I like driving. I like getting out and around the country. But if you've ever driven a van with no radio from 3 o'clock in the morning till 3:45 in the afternoon to drop something off and have no radio, that is a very boring life. Radio save your life when you drive wagons, I can tell you. So what was the next step? I got married. So as you can see in the picture on the right hand side, I took it very seriously. And as you can see on the left hand side, we were quite youngish when we met. So on the 7th of July this year, we will celebrate our 31st wedding anniversary. So we've done all right. So we got marriage, which meant responsibility and a mortgage. So we wanted to plan for a family. So we bought ourselves a little house, but it needed quite a lot of doing up. Yes, if you're looking really close in the picture, you can see on the left I had a blonde highlighted mullet, and on the right I have a perm and a tash. So yes, it was the late 80s, early 90s. I got married in 1990. So as you can see, I went through a few fashion tropes along the way as well. So as I said, until I got to driving wagons, anybody who offered me a little bit extra money could get my services. But when you've got a house that needs doing up, because it was the only one we could afford, it was £17,249. But it needed quite a lot of work doing to it. So I had quite a few friends and I worked at the weekend and evenings, but we needed money to buy materials. So for 2 years, I had 2 full-time jobs. I worked during the day at some street printers, driving my wagons and forklift trucks. And then literally a 3-minute walk across and up the road was a Pizza Hut where I got a job, and I worked full-time there. And when I say full-time, I used to do overtime at work at weekends and at Pizza Hut. So both jobs I would do on average 40 to 45 hours a week. And the time I wasn't working, I was either sleeping or working on the house. So we got the house into a good position where we were comfortable. Most of the rooms were done. We didn't need extra money to do jobs. So I dropped the second job, and then an opportunity came along. The manager of the dispatch department got poorly, and they wanted somebody to cover him. So they asked me. So he gave me a 1-day handover and said, basically, you have to make sure we deliver everything we should. So that was my 1 day's training in the job. So I became the boss, which was really fun. I realised that I was quite good at organising and planning things. I actually got commended for doing a better job than the person who I was covering for. So when that person came back, they looked for an opportunity to use me in an organising and planning role, and they put me in charge of the warehouse. So that was more forklift trucks, which was fun, but I got to organise things. And doing stock takes and things like that is really fun. But at times when you're managing people, it is a little bit like herding cats. So it's not for everybody. I've gone all the way up to being a director, and I like mentoring people, I like helping people, but like line managing people, it's not for everybody, and it wasn't really for me. So after 13 years with the company, I got all the way up to director. I was QHSE director, which means I was responsible for quality, health and safety and environment for the British Kite Mark, and I did all the auditing. I got trained as an auditor within that time as well. But the company unfortunately folded, and I got made redundant. They tried to save it 3 times, which meant I got made redundant 3 times. I had to reapply for jobs and stuff, but in the end, it collapsed. So there was no company left. So I looked around for something else to do. And by this time, I had a young child, Kirsty, who came along in 1995. And I wanted security, I wanted a steady wage. I could have gone consulting as an auditor. There's a few things I could have done, but I basically just wanted that salary coming in on a regular basis. So I joined a company called Home Loan Management Limited, or HML, and joined the office life. I can't say I was that excited about it to start with. It was interesting learning the different stuff, and within 3 months, they'd confirmed my 6 months probation, and within 4 months, I'd been promoted to a senior in the what do you call it? Redemptions department. Lost the word then. In the redemptions department, we also used to deal with direct debits, so you had to be organised and plan stuff and all that sort of stuff. And then along came another opportunity. So M-Day was on October 31st, 2004, and it was a massive change to mortgage regulations, and that meant lots of system changes because the company I worked for did third-party management of mortgages. So as I was using the system to do redemptions and direct debits, I was asked to do the user acceptance testing and test the system to make sure that it did everything it was supposed to do. I didn't really get told properly what all the things it was supposed to do, and I definitely didn't get told how to test it. So 2003, there wasn't a lot of Google about. I didn't even have a home computer. So I went to the place I usually went when I was interested to do something or learn something, which was the library. The library let me find a book called The Art of Software Testing by Glenn J. Myers. Now that's in its, I think, 3rd edition, but it was from 1979 when it was originally published. But I found the information there really fascinating about different ways of looking at software and testing it, and the opportunities that you could have. I also read a little bit about writing test reports and what to include in there. So after my 2 weeks of UAT testing, I gave a test report to the test manager, who was the liaison, and I got a call to come into his office. And I thought it was just to discuss the report, but he asked me where I'd worked as a software tester. He was quite impressed with it. He said, "This is better than half of my people. And we have a job coming up. I think you should apply for it." So that's sort of where I got into software testing in 2003. And I'm sorry, I'm not keeping up with slides. I'm like not doing a great job. I apologise. But yeah, he said I should apply for the job and become one of us, which I thought was a strange line. But anyway, you'll see why the picture's there. So long story short, over the next, I'd say about 10 years, I found I really loved testing. I got really into the test community. I found the ministry testing. I thought it was something that allowed me to use both sides of my brain. I could be creative in the way I came up with tests, and analysed things and looked at requirements to see if there was ambiguity in there. And I could be really analytical in assessing the results and working out how to replicate bugs and things like that. It was really good. It was really interesting. The only bad time I had was with a test manager who thought it was a fantastic idea to measure both the test team. So we were an isolated team. This was before Agile, or I'd worked in Agile. We were an isolated test team, and the isolated dev team, they measured both of us in bugs raised. So it was a good thing if a tester raised a bug, and it was a bad thing if a tester raised a bug. So you ended up just with all these arguments between each other. So I ended up just not raising bugs. I stopped talking about bugs and stopped using the word. I talked about behaviors and whether it was desired or not. And I let the developer tell me whether it was an actual bug or not, if they were happy for me to raise it as such. So as a result, I was classed as underperforming, but I put some stats together, and over a 2-year period, the software I tested had no issues in live, and the combined rest of the team, they had 100% of the bugs in live, of which was quite a few. So I think my way worked a little bit better. I then moved into business intelligence, where I ended up being a BI manager and became responsible for quality. That was working in an Agile environment, so I got to learn all about Agile, which was really cool. I had a really, really good mentor called Andy Johnson, and he was fantastic. He gave me the freedom to just go out and learn and do things, and that was so cool. But because I had an audit background, I was helping with internal audits for our department. I was asked to cover illness for the audit support manager. They said it would be no more than 4 to 5 months, and if it looked like it was going to 6 months, they would advertise the role and get somebody into it. So obviously, 2 years later, I was getting really fed up of not testing. Although auditing's fun, once I'd found testing, there was sort of no going back for me. I'd kept in touch with the test community. I'd kept in touch with Ministry of Testing. I'd gone to meetups and stuff like that. So I'd never really left the test community. I wasn't working as a tester, and that sort of made me sad. Even though you can sort of say testing department systems by auditing is a form of testing. It wasn't like software testing. It wasn't as hands-on. It was like a lot of asking questions, which obviously as testers we need to ask lots of questions. But yeah, it wasn't as fulfilling, shall I say, as when I was actually testing. So after 2 years, I said enough is enough. I'm applying for a job back in. I'm going to leave the company and go get a job as a tester. And a position, actually, as I was having this conversation with my line manager, who was a member of the senior leadership team, a position came up within the company. I knew most of the people in the department because I'd kept in touch with them, even though I was working somewhere else. So I applied for it. I even offered to take a pay cut to get into the role. That's how much I wanted back into testing. And they said, no, you're all right. But when I got back, I got put in the team that was doing the first ever digital project in the company. And this digital project was to do a customer-facing website so that people could log in and have a look at their mortgage, make payments, do a few other little bits and bats, contact support, those sorts of things. And because of this, they wanted me to have a look at accessibility and see how thinking about accessibility would affect the project, because they had a desire in the requirements to meet level AA of the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG, as lots of people call it. So I started looking to accessibility in 2015. I found it fascinating, the different ways people needed to interact with software. I learned about numeronyms, which is that on the screen, A11Y, which my Twitter handle is A11Y Ady, or Ali Ady, as most people pronounce it. But the 11 stands for the 11 letters between the A and the Y in accessibility. Didn't know that. I found out that the numeronyms were all over the place, like Y2K and 24/7. So I'd always known them, but I didn't know what they were called. So that was an interesting tidbit I got along the way. But yeah, I found it fascinating, and I've been a continuous learner ever since. I love the way it's my little contribution to making the world better for people. If I can spot an accessibility issue with a piece of software and get it sorted out so that they have a better experience when using the software, that's even if it makes one person's life a little bit easier, then that makes me happy, really. So what I've done over the last 6 years, is I've grown into becoming more or less an accessibility specialist. I don't call myself an expert. I describe myself more as an accessibility advocate. But if I've got specialist in my job title now, I suppose I should really use it. I've spoken internationally on accessibility, and I've made sure accessibility is a key part of the software testing bootcamp that we do, that people understand, well, that and other specialisms. So this is for anybody who's heard of me before, I do like a visual heuristic, and I created the periodic table of testing many moons ago. That's available on thebigtesttheory.com to have a look at if you're interested in that. If you're getting into software, it's a good way of looking at all the different things you might have to look at and all the different avenues you could take. But for accessibility, I find the web content accessibility guidelines very hard to get into. They have this PAW model, which is perceivable, operable, usable, and robust. And I've found it hard right from the beginning to tie them into areas. You know, usable makes the most sense to me because I understand usability and things like that, but like operable and robust, it doesn't sit well with me. So I've always tried to explain accessibility and those sorts of things from a simple language point of view and try and make it clear. So I put together these quadrants to try and explain, well, I did it for a talk to try and explain that accessibility isn't just about disability and isn't just about compliance, although compliance can be a very useful tool to gauging where you are with accessibility on whatever application or system you are on. But if we're not thinking about all users' experience, not just some, so I've forgotten his name now, John Gregory, I think his name is, he came up with this saying, if you only consider some users' experience, doesn't it make it SUX or sucks? So I sort of took that to heart the first time I heard that. So the user experience should be for all, not just some. Have clean and simple UI, clearly defined steps, and the accessible user experience should be a comparable journey to, and I do not want to say normal. I hate it when people talk about the normal experience versus the accessible experience. Everybody has different experience. I have assistive technology on my face. I wear a pair of glasses, and if I take them off, I struggle to see the screen. And the bifocals, so I struggle with distance and close-up reading. But yeah, comparable journeys for mouse users, screen reader users, keyboard users, braille keyboard users, people who use blowtubes. It doesn't really matter, but give them a comparable experience through the software. That's something I fight for at work and something they do really care about. Readability for me is really important. So having all capital words, that can be a struggle for screen readers, but it's also a struggle for everybody to read. It slows you down. There was some great research by the Nielsen Institute about all capital words slowing you down between 10 and 15%, depending on the individual. Justified text slows you down by 10, 15%, depending on the individual. And that also has problems for neurodiverse people. Explain your acronyms or don't use them. And obviously inclusive language, having empathy for everybody is important to me. So I don't like titles on forms where it gives me information. I generally get magazines and things through the letterbox that call me Lord or Sir, because I don't like them. And there's usually not an option to just not put it. They and them is just as good a way of addressing people. I try not to use the term guys if it's a mixed group of people. So I try to say folks or you or them or everyone or whatever it might be. But it's all about that empathy and respect. and then we've obviously got the compliance. So there's different compliance around the world. America talks about Section 508 of the ADA, which is the Americans with Disabilities Act. In the UK, we have various disability acts, and then there's an overarching web content accessibility guidelines, which hopefully 2.2 should be out. Well, they're all American who do it, so by the fall, so by the start of winter or autumn, maybe. So that's sort of where I've got to. So thanks to Gabby, who did an excellent talk on personal branding, and Beth Marshall and a reputation review that she did. I did quite a lot of work on what I should call my brand. I've sort of fancied doing something with branding for quite a long time. And at one point I was thinking about being the poetic tester, because I like writing testing poetry, and raps and songs and some other weird stuff that you don't really need to go into. But yeah, I had a rebrand this year and call myself Ali Ady, or A11Y Ady on Twitter. I do Ali with Ady monthly posts on my blog, and I do short Ali with Ady tweets where I put out a little tip to do with accessibility, whether it's all capitals. If you use hashtags, do what's called Camelcasing, which is capitalize the first letter of the hashtag, makes it much more readable for everybody, but a screen reader will just shoot through the whole thing and try and read it all as one word. Whereas if it's got capital letters in, it will read the words individually and pause in between because it knows there's a new word. So just little things like that. I try to share the information that I gain as I go along. If there's any members of the Ministry of Testing out there who are pro members, the 99-minute workshops are free for pro members, and I have a workshop at, I believe it's 8 p.m. on the 30th of June, which I think is the last opportunity for you to do my interactive accessibility quiz, where I don't start by asking you questions about accessibility because that would be rather unfair. Instead, I start by sharing information about accessibility, and then we go through a quiz, and hopefully I'll give you quite a few hints and tips so you can start answering the questions. It's quite interesting. There are 10 images that I came across in the real world. There are more than 10 answers because each one usually has more than one thing that could be wrong with accessibility. So that is about it for me. And it looks like there's some questions on the chat or some comments. So I'm just going to have a little look.
Yeah, I think there's been a few things that have come through, more kind of observations really than anything. I know that I was saying, guys, that's something that I am really bad at, but also, and I think you might have pointed it out to me, or somebody definitely did, I quite like a hashtag on Twitter, but I do it in all lowercase. It just had never crossed my mind that that wouldn't be obviously able to be read out to someone, because it would just kind of merge into one. So that's another habit that I need to try and break as well, to be honest. But unless someone points it out to you, you just don't know, do you? So that's why, you know, what you're doing is so important.
Yeah, so I mean, it's taken me 6 years, and I'm still learning new stuff every. I mean, I learned a lot of stuff about dark mode and light mode, and contrast. And in the boot camp, when I'm talking about accessibility specialisms, right at the beginning of the course, we say one of the most common things you will hear on this course is it depends, because context comes to software testing. So I asked the question, which is best for accessibility, light mode or dark mode? And of course the answer is it depends, because dark mode, yes, it's better for a lot of people, and there's been quite a lot of research about people with 20/20 vision and how it's easier on their eyes. Some people say it uses less battery, but that's an urban myth. It doesn't. It takes the same amount of battery to render the screen, no matter what the colours are. And yes, dark mode is much better when you're outside in the sunshine. Like this summer, during the summertime, if I'm out of the house, I switch most of my apps that have it over to dark mode, just because it's so much easier to read when there's reflections and glare on the screen.
Yeah.
There's people with certain eye conditions and stuff that dark mode is just awful and horrible for them, and it gives them headaches and things like that, and they just can't cope with it.
Well, I'm team light mode normally, but I work with a lot of people who swear by dark mode. So I suppose a lot of it is personal preference, isn't it? I mean, one question that really kind of cropped up in my mind, I suppose, while I was listening to your talk, Ady, is I know that you've left testing once and, you know, you were super keen to get back into it. Do you ever envision there being a time again where you might feel ready to leave test, or is there an opportunity out there that you think, right, if that opened up, maybe I'd leave test, or are you in it for good now?
I don't think you can ever say never.
Yeah.
But it'd have to be testing adjacent, shall we say? I don't know if that's the right way to explain it. So over the last few years, I've done consultancy, I've run workshops, and different things. I was supposed to be at Nordic Testing Days doing a one-day accessibility workshops on auditing. So obviously, it's in a Zoom thing. I can give you the information, but I can't have the one-on-one chats as easily.
Yeah.
Without disturbing everybody else. So like walking around desks and having a quiet chat with someone, you get a lot more tactile information like that and things. So I said it wouldn't be fair on the people attending to do it remote.
No.
Smaller chunks like my 99-minute workshop are good. I've got involved with the Coders Guild a few years ago, looking to create a software testing apprenticeship.
Yeah.
The pandemic sort of kiboshed a bit of work on that. So at the end of last year, it was sort of resurrected as a boot camp. So all the work I've done for the apprenticeship, we've used as the template for the boot camp. I've got a great team of testers working with me, like Scott Kenyon, Beth Marshall's been on it, Suman, Livina. But we've got a great little team together, and to do it, because the Coders Guild are like professional training company, we've had to learn more about teaching and follow the rules. So I find that really fascinating. I do like teaching people, because generally when you have a conversation teaching somebody about a subject, you will hear something and learn from it. You will hear, oh, so does that mean this? And I go, oh, I've not thought of that, but yes. So I'll add that to my knowledge bank as well. Yeah, so just little things like that. So we're on the third cohort of the boot camp now, and it's all part of the government's retraining plan. So taking people who've been furloughed or been made out of work for whatever reason during the pandemic, and they're free for the people who take them. The government pays the Coders Guild pays me and the other trainers, but it's basically free. And to be honest, for the amount of hours we paid and the amount of hours we do to support all the students, we're doing a lot for free, if I'm perfectly honest.
Because you're passionate, I suppose, isn't it? At the bottom line.
Yeah, we've had some cracking stories from people. We had one chap who, he was a software checker. He worked in a release team and executing scripts. So his job title was software tester, but to me, he's only ever been a software checker, because he was just following the script. He was never going off script, never questioning the script. And he came to the first session, which is what he's testing. So we have a 3-hour session just explaining what software testing is. We get him testing within the first half an hour of the session. And by the end of it, we have a Ask Me Anything session on it or whatever. And at the end of the session, he just said, do you know, I've been doing testing for 5.5 years and I didn't know it was this. If I'd known it was this, I'd have had so much more fun with it.
Yeah.
And by the end of the boot camp, Scott did some one-on-one mentoring with him, and he very recently got a job which was like 3 levels above his pay grade he was.
Oh, amazing.
It's essentially, it's not labelled as such, but it's essentially a senior software tester role.
Yeah.
He's got about a 10k salary kick.
Because he had that basis of knowledge, I suppose. It's just that education piece that, you know, this is what extra you can be doing, and you pick up a few little extra areas and another company will massively value what you do. And I think I speak to, as you can imagine as a recruiter, I speak to testers all the time that have maybe been in jobs for years and years, and because it's so siloed what they do, they don't even realize all of the different elements they could potentially get involved with. And it's almost like them realizing, oh, actually, you know, I don't need to maybe think about a different job path. There's just so much more to learn within testing. But it's difficult when you've been in one company for a long time. If no one's training you up on new things, you know, it's hard, isn't it? So that's why, you know, kind of attending industry events, I always say to everyone, that's the best way to broaden your horizons, isn't it? And kind of see what other people are doing out there. We've actually got a few questions.
Yeah, I've just saw that.
Yeah, brilliant. So we will go through those. So Chris has gone first. So what is one good testing tool you would recommend for a beginner, obviously around accessibility testing? So something that's quick and easy to pick up, or just something that you would say is kind of well worth investing their time to learn?
So there's a website, well, an organization called WebAIM, that's Web Accessibility in Mind. So webaim.org, I think, is the main URL. And they're funded and created NVDA, which is non-visual descriptive audio for Windows machines. It's a free screen reader. Of course, until NVDA came along, there was no free screen readers. They've also created a tool called Wave, which you can get as a browser extension on Chrome and Firefox. I'm not sure about, I've ever seen it on Edge, but Edge is converting to Chromium, so the Chrome extensions will probably work on there in the near future. But that's called the Web Accessibility Evaluation Tool. So I know those words don't sound anything like Wave, but just go. So that is basically just a little extension. You click and it will scan the page and it will give you a report about how many errors it finds, how many contrast errors, how many ARIA labels there are, how many headings, how many regions. And the great thing about Wave for a beginner is if you click on any of those errors, it will give you a link directly to the code that it's flagged, so you can see the code, and it gives you a link to a description of what it is that's flagged, why it matters, and where you can find information to fix it, all in a little column at the left-hand side of your screen.
Yeah.
So anybody wants to go have a play with this, I will give you one piece of advice, and one piece of advice only. The first time you click it, it depends what site you're on. If it's a really bad one, you will go, what on earth is going on? It will look very much different, and there will little dots of colors everywhere on the screen. So what I recommend you do is on the left-hand side, scroll down to the bottom and untick the main blocks, because you can just view it one block at a time, and untick them all until you have one block of information. It will then be visually easier to take in and easier to understand, and you can click on the individual ones and explore them without millions of things around it.
Okay, excellent. I'm going to be naughty and jump in. I've actually got a question that's not on the chat, but just something that's sprang to mind when you were talking then. So I suppose once you've done your audit, if you will, and you've kind of found any potential shortcomings within the accessibility, have you ever been met with a lot of resistance from then liaising with whoever it is, developers or designers? Is that a difficult conversation, or are they happy to receive that information from you?
Well, I've been quite fortunate in the team I worked for the best part of 5 years. They wanted to know about accessibility, how it would affect. So literally from the start of the project, we were talking about inclusive design. We were thinking about the user journeys and testing for accessibility. I introduced Keyboard Thursdays or Wednesdays, I think it were originally, then it moved to Thursdays. So basically, nobody in the team was allowed to use the mouse on the Wednesday. So that's really interesting to make people, force them when they're using the application to use just the keyboard. It makes it really interesting because it's a different experience from what most people are used to. Yeah. Keyboard is the basis of a lot of accessibility things. If you've got good keyboard navigation, your screen reader works better, because a lot of people who use screen readers mainly use the keyboard, not all. But yeah, so they are difficult conversations, but there's a few key things that you can say. Number one is up to 20% of your users could have accessibility issues. And that's not me picking a number out there, that's the World Health Organization who estimate, based on quite wide research, there's over 1 billion people with accessibility needs. Not necessarily just disability, but accessibility needs. Everybody at any point in their lifetime, at any given moment, can join that cohort.
Yeah.
You can get hit by a bus, you can get a disease, you can fall out of a tree. It doesn't, there's lots of things, but any given moment in time, you can join that cohort. If you fall out of a tree and break your arm, you have a temporary impairment. Therefore, for a period of time, if you can't use your arm at all because it's broken, you are exactly the same as somebody with one arm, even though yours is temporary and theirs is permanent. So if you want to give up 20% of revenue, because most places like making money, not all, but most, if you want to give up 20% of revenue, and if you're global, if you want to get sued, because there are over 1,000 lawsuits being raised in America every single month on accessibility issues, if you want to fall foul of the law and not consider accessibility, you are breaking disability acts by not considering them. So there's lots of arguments you can have. If people say it's not many users, you've got ammunition. If people say it's not costing as much, you've got ammunition. If people say, well, nobody's really bothered about it, well, there's government regulations that say they're bothered about it.
Yeah, so it's just, I suppose, using knowledge is power, isn't it? And I suppose, and just having those pushback points. I mean, you would hope that you wouldn't be met with the resistance anyway, but, you know, summing it up with percentages, facts and figures, I think help massively. Right, I think we've got a few questions from Andy, which we will go through, and then we will jump onto a short break. So let me have a little look.
Well, do you want me to
I was going to say, on Andy's note, there's like, did a presentation a few years ago, and one of the last QABCs we did on accessibility. It's like, yeah, no company, they think they are not untouchable. It's like, especially like, I think it was like Pizza Hut, Domino's Pizza, Domino's.
It was Domino's. Yeah. Whose app and website wasn't accessible to blind people.
Yeah. It's like one of them was like even Netflix, because they thought, no one's going to use subtitles. Oh, how wrong they were.
I love subtitles. I use subtitles. Obviously, I can.
So do I.
Watch without, but I just find that I buy into stuff that I watch so much more if I put subtitles on, and my boyfriend thinks it's so weird, but I don't know, I just think you engage more with what you're watching.
Yeah, I think subtitles are good as well.
Yeah,
especially like in gaming, is like I found having more subtitles on, it's like it's easier to follow. Yeah, so like
yeah,
definitely. Right, well, we will go through Andy's questions. So he's just got one actually around, I think the apprenticeship that you were mentioning at the start there. So I know obviously due to COVID it didn't go ahead, but what kind of areas did you outline as kind of key points to cover in the apprenticeship? What did you kind of identify as important?
Yeah, so basically I designed it so it was basically a journey for someone who knew nothing about it. So we started with what is testing, what is quality, what is a testing mindset. Then we talked about the fundamentals. So in plain English, we talked about the ISTQB stuff, like your boundary value analysis. We didn't bother with state transition diagrams because I don't think I've ever seen anybody use them. But yeah, we covered all the fundamentals about testing. So how do you test an input field was a key part of that. And getting them to do research on these things. Heuristics and mnemonics was in that early part of there. Thought techniques, 6 thinking hats, all these sorts of different stuff. We talked about documenting and reporting bugs. So in the boot camps, that session's become, I've found a bug, what next? So we talk about bug reporting and all that sort of stuff. And then in the second part, we also give them advice on speaking in front of people, in front of groups. And in the middle of it, we have a showcase, which is all the students do a lightning talk of between 5 and 10 minutes on something they've learned in the first half of the boot camp. So it gets them to practice their presentation skills, because like every tester at some point has stood up in front of a room to explain something. And you're very lucky if you haven't. But I like that expression, testers are the glue that holds the team together, because they're the ones always asking questions about stuff. So in the second half, we go into, once we've got that foundation in place, we go into more specific individual areas. So we talk about ilities and focus on testability, observability, and monitorability. We have a session on specialisms. So we cover automation, security, accessibility, API testing, performance testing. So we give them an outline of all those things. We have a whole session on technical testing, so using developer tools and all those sorts of things. We do have a full session on automation. So we touch on it a little bit in the specialisms and then point out we're going to have a full session on it. So we'll give them a little taster. And then we have a whole session on agile theory and practice. So how are you going to work in teams with a range of specialisms in it, and talk about agile ceremonies as the most common ones, but it depends where you work, because you might get variations and things like that. So yeah, we try and set them all the way through from the beginning of building that foundation, then through to the other end, and all the way through, we ask them to build a portfolio of their learnings. So that can be videos of them doing exploratory testing. So I forgot to mention that we have a whole session on exploratory testing. And we ask them to actually create their own charters and record their sessions and add it to their portfolio. About the success stories earlier, one of the people from cohort 2 was selected from 160 people to get a software testing apprenticeship, and the Coders Guild's put an interview up, and the hiring manager said everybody from the Coders Guild was really high quality, but what made this person stand out was they talked about accessibility in the interviews and covered accessibility things, and he says that's a passion of mine and things people don't talk about enough. So I was quite chuffed at that one. So yeah, that's basically it. It's building that foundation and then telling them about all the variations. And we even have an employability session at the end. So we talk about questions that might come up in interviews and all that sort of thing. How to tailor your CV to show what experience. If you've never worked in testing, how do you show experience in testing? Yeah. Well, working for these sites that pay £5 a bug, testing charity sites and giving them free feedback on it. There's lots of different ways we encourage them to do it.
Brilliant. Well, what we will do, Ady, is we'll wrap up with one last question from Andy, and then we will jump onto our break. Obviously, people feel free to chat in the chat box while we are on break. So, final question, with accessibility, have you noticed any restrictions or difficulties within certain browsers, so across Chrome, Firefox, Edge? Is there any that throw up particular troubles?
I don't think I would isolate a browser as a particular issue. It's generally the bad way people implement the software that makes the accessibility issues, like putting in keyboard traps so people get to a certain point and can't go anywhere. It was really interesting. We had a major supermarket as a customer in a project, and they were banging on about accessibility. So I went on their site, and literally within 2 minutes, I found 6 quite major accessibility issues. And I said, do you want me to give them some free feedback? They said, yeah. And funnily enough, they quietened down on the accessibility, even though we were doing it.
Yeah.
People in glass houses shouldn't throw stones, they say, but we did it very diplomatically.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wouldn't say there's a particular browser. It's more about where it's implemented. The WebAIM Million survey uses the tool Wave that I mentioned to assess 1 million websites, and it does it across quite a few browsers to make it fair. The ones where Wave's available, because you can put a URL into Wave's website and test it there, even if you can't get the extension. And they found 98% of home pages had some form of accessibility issues. Now, I'm pretty sure we can do better than that. 98%.
Yeah,
But
just
yeah,
shows the scale, doesn't it? I suppose of not necessarily the issue, but I think it's just something that it's all too easy for companies to kind of sweep under the carpet. And I know even myself, I speak to a lot of testers every single day, and it's not something that is particularly, highly mentioned on CVs or something that a lot of people shout about. So I think there's still a lot to be done. And I know, obviously, Alex, after the break, is going to jump on and talk about it from his point of view, from kind of a software engineer dev point of view. But it's definitely food for thought for everyone moving forward as well.
Yeah. So I'm going to stop sharing. Is that all right?
Yeah, brilliant. I think I can grab that back off. What I will do is, let's have a little look. Let me see if I can reclaim being host. There we go. I think we're working. Yeah, we are. Fabulous. So what we are going to do is just jump on to a break. 10 minutes is probably a bit generous because in person. So we will just do 5, come back at 7:05 just to give everyone a chance to go to the toilet, get a drink, whatever else. And then obviously we will hear from Alex. So I shall catch back up with you shortly.
Yeah, I'm just going to say I'm going to answer that question that we didn't get to in the chat.
Go on mute, Gabby. Oh, you go. Right, I don't know. I really do need to go. I'll be back in a minute.
Oh, no. Oops. Ooh. Yeah, fantastic presentation. Talk, Ady.
Oh, cheers, Andrew. I'm just answering your question on incorporating accessibility into a software-based system.
Thank you. Yeah. Ooh. Yeah. Start on keyboard days. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Thank you. Yeah. Mm. How you doing, Chris?
I'm very well, thank you very much. Yeah, I literally went outside for about 2 minutes to get some of the sun, and then came back in again.
Yeah, it's really sunny here in Chester. It's pretty overcast, to be honest. But I mean, it's been gorgeous all day.
Yeah, the wind is, well, a little breeze has just crept up.
Yeah.
And yeah, I can see some of the clouds coming over from your way. Yeah, cheers, Gabby.
Yeah, sorry, I'm sorry. My apologies.
It's been absolutely lovely where we. It's been absolutely lovely where we are.
Where are you?
Yeah, keep. Just long may it continue.
Yeah, definitely. Right, shall we get back started? I think everyone is back. So moving quite nicely, I suppose, on the theme of the night, and from everything that Ady's been talking about there, our next guest speaker is Alex. So it's going to be really interesting to hear things from a software engineer point of view. So I can see that you're at Cinch at the moment. Am I right in thinking you're ex-Code Computer Law? Is that where you were when we last heard you speak? Yeah.
That is correct.
I suppose fairly recently start a new job, which is always interesting to hear about, and you are active as well with your blogging, so make sure we check that out. What I am going to do now, Alex, is just make sure that you can screen share.
Yeah, and I just want to take accountability for those awful bullet points. They wouldn't resize. So if you're wondering why they're wrong, it's like, yeah, that's on me, that one. I'm really sorry.
All layout. Yeah, just similar to with AD questions as we go along in the chat box, if anything crops up, and we'll go through that at the end. Right, I shall hand over, Alex.
No worries. Right, let's
Let me start
sharing my screen and make sure I share the right one. This one. Can I share? Can you see my screen?
Yes, you are live.
Right, sweet. Let's start the slide. So, hello everyone, my name is Alex, and I'm here today to try and talk about why accessibility is so important and how you as QAs, or if anyone's aspiring to be a QA, what tools are out there to try and help make the web a more accessible place to be. And a lot of the stuff actually that you talked about after in the Q&A session of Ady, I'm actually going to talk about as well, and do some nice demos where I can. Before I get onto that, I'll talk a little bit about myself. I am currently a front-end software engineer at Cinch Cars Limited. I've been there now for around 8 or 9 months. And as Gabby mentioned before, prior to that, I had the privilege of working at Code Computer Love with Ken and with Chris for almost 3.5 years. Within front-end, I like to specialize and have a passion in accessibility, which makes sense why I'm here today. And outside of work, I like to head to the gym. I'm into indoor climbing, and I like to play football where I can, even though I'm really pants at it, but I try. And a bit of a fun fact is that I was once a child model. I've got a little bit of a picture of myself here when I was like 3 or 4 years old, rocking a massive like bowl-shaped haircut. My hair's quietly thinned out a bit since then, unfortunately, so I'm quite jealous of my hair back in the day. But anyway, that's enough about me. Back onto the topic of accessibility. Now, I was actually going to talk about what the term ALI means, but Ady has already explained it. So he beat me to the punch. I see it as great minds think alike. So I will skip on to the next bit, which is why should we care about it? Why should it be something that we talk about on a regular basis? Why should it be at the forefront of everything that we do? And it's very simple, really. The first reason, and the reason that I stand by the most, in that it's morally the right thing to do. We as individuals and as businesses that we work within, we all have a moral obligation to make websites or whatever other products that we work on to be as accessible as it possibly can be. According to a study from scope.org a few years ago, there's over 14 million people in the UK that have some form of disability or impairment. And by not making our website or products accessible, we create exclusion for those people, and that simply isn't fair. The second reason, which is more related to websites, in the fact that it's good for SEO. making improvements around accessibility crosses over into SEO. So doing simple things like making sure images have good alt text and making sure that headings have a good hierarchy, all those things, as well as improving accessibility, improve SEO as well. So accessibility improves a website in more ways than one, and Google actually now favors websites that are more accessible. So the more accessible you can make your website, the higher it will rank in Google search. If you're still not convinced by those two reasons, hopefully this last one will, with the fact that it's actually the law. We have a legal obligation to make websites accessible. It's actually covered under the Equality Act of 2010, and there have been some cases where companies have been sued for having websites that aren't accessible. As Ady mentioned, this is something that happens more in the US, but I wouldn't be surprised if in the near future, if the same thing happened here in the UK. There might already be some cases in the UK where there are companies that are being sued, but because they're probably not big name companies, that's probably why it's not reached the headlines. So I'm going to talk about a couple of lawsuits that have happened, and something that was mentioned during Ady's QA was around Domino's. There was a lawsuit filed against them. There was a gentleman who relied on a screen reader to navigate through the web. They tried to order a pizza using Domino's mobile app, which ordinarily should be a very, very simple task to do. However, this individual was unable to do this because the app wasn't built in an accessible way. Domino's actually tried to challenge this lawsuit and stated that no rules exist to make their platforms accessible, which is probably the most ludicrous statement I've ever heard. There are rules and guidelines out there. As Ady mentioned, we have WCAG, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And even in the US, they have their own set of rules. They have the ADA, which stands for the Americans with Disabilities Act, which involves things around websites. So in the end, their plea was dismissed, surprise, surprise, and Domino's must now defend themselves in court. Another example was Winn-Dixie, a similar situation. There was an individual who relied on a screen reader. They tried to navigate through the Winn-Dixie website and were unable to do so. They took Winn-Dixie to court, and the court ruled that Winn-Dixie violated the ADA. And in the end, Winn-Dixie chose to set aside $250,000 to make their site accessible, which is a hefty amount of money. So it's worth mentioning, like this relates to what Ady said before, accessibility is for everyone. Everyone can enjoy more seamless experiences with products or websites that are made in an accessible way. And when we think about accessibility, when we improve the experience for people who have accessibility needs, we're not just improving the experience for them, we're improving the experience for everyone involved. So it's a win-win for everyone. So I mentioned how it's for everyone. So how can you help? How can you as QAs or aspiring QAs, what tools are out there for you to try and make the web a better place? Because trying to make the web a more accessible place isn't just solely reliant on one individual. It's a collective effort. It stems from content to design, engineering, QA. Everyone has an important part to play. So how can you help? And I've kind of categorized these into two parts. The first one is more around automated testing tools. I'll try and demo as many of these as I can. Some of these tools you'll have already heard about since Ady mentioned them a little bit before. The first one that I'm going to talk about is Lighthouse by Google. This is an automated auditing tool to help improve the overall quality of web pages. It's built directly into Chrome, but it can also be installed as a separate browser extension if you wanted to. As well as checking for how accessible a web page is, it can also check the overall performance of a web page, so how fast it loads, for example. It also checks how good the SEO is, if it follows best practices, and how much of a progressive web app it is. So I'm going to give a quick demo of that. So if I close my slides for the time being, and I'm currently on the NASA website. To bring up DevTools, you can either right click and press inspect, or if you're on a Mac, the keyboard command is Command Option I, and I believe if you're on Windows, it's Control Shift I. If I'm wrong, please correct me. Once you've got DevTools open, you'll then want to head to the Lighthouse tab, and you'll then want to select which categories you want to get a report from. So I'm only going to choose accessibility for the time being. and I'm going to press generate report, and this will go off and do a quick audit, and it'll give me some instant feedback as to any issues that may have occurred around accessibility. So this web page has got a score of 90 out of 100. Now, it's also worth stressing here that even if this said 100 out of 100, this doesn't necessarily mean it's fully accessible, because the Lighthouse audit isn't able to cover every kind of issue out there. So I thought it'd be worth mentioning that. But for any issues it does spot, it does give you a bit of information as to what the issue is. So in this case, there is an issue with an element that if I hover over this bit here, it will say that this banner here, the two colors, this red and orange and white, basically just aren't a good combination of colors and have a poor contrast ratio. So someone who may be partially sighted or who is colorblind, for example, may not be able to read this text very clearly. So that's Google Lighthouse. Let's go back to the slides. The next tool that I want to briefly mention is Axe DevTools by a company called DQ. This is a toolkit that is directly specific for finding issues related to accessibility. They have a dedicated browser extension for Chrome, Firefox, and I do believe Edge is now supported as well, since it's been moved over to use Chromium. They do have different price plans, but the extensions on the browser are free to use. So again, let's do a quick demo of that. I've already installed a browser extension. So I've got my DevTools open, and then I've got this little tab here that says Axe DevTools. I've opened that up, and then I'm presented with this little window here. Because I'm only on the free plan, I can only scan the entire page. If you're on a certain plan, you could scan certain elements of the page, but for the time being, we'll just scan the entire page, and we'll get some instant feedback. We'll get, apparently there's 41 issues on this page, 33 of them need reviewing. At the bottom, if I scroll down on the left-hand side, it will say what the issues are. And if I look on the right-hand side, I've got a bit more information as to whereabouts these issues are occurring. So if you look at the elements, must have sufficient color contrast. If you look on the right, I can highlight the area that it's talking about. So in this case, it goes back to a similar issue that the Lighthouse audit reported, that these two colors just don't have a sufficient ratio. So it'll make it harder for people to read. So that's a brief look into Axe DevTools. Go back to the slides. And one that Ady mentioned before was Wave by WebAIM. This is a nice handy evaluation tool for trying to find out any issues that there might be. They do have a dedicated Chrome and Firefox extension. However, I'm not sure if Edge may support it now. I'm not 100% sure on that, but let's do a quick demo. I'm going to copy the nasa.gov website and head over to WebAIM, and I'm going to simply paste in the web address, hit enter, and it will do a quick audit, and there's some issues that have been found. Now, what Ady referred to before about unchecking all the boxes, if this was a web page that had more issues than this could get quite messy. So if you wanted to narrow down certain issues, you could just untick them and then focus on one issue at a time. So in this case, we've got errors, and I want to focus on a missing form label. So I can see this icon up here. This basically means that this input is missing a label to explain to a user what content is needed in this input, essentially. So yeah, that's WebAIM. Head back to our slides. And those are just some of the automated testing tools that are out there. There's by far a lot more than what I've shown to you today. Before I move away from automated testing, I want to kind of mention that as good as automated testing is, it shouldn't be the sole thing that you rely on most when it comes to testing, because it only really covers around 20 or 30% of all accessibility issues from articles that I've read, which still leaves between 80 and 70% of untested issues, which is a very, very high number. So when you're looking at using automated testing, make sure you do manual testing as well. Using both together ensures that you're covering as many issues as possible. And with the automated testing tools, there's a lot of manual tools out there as well that you can use that are at your disposal. For things related to color, there is a wide amount of color contrast checking tools out there, and they simply just tell you whether these two color combinations work well together and have a good contrast ratio so that the content is easy to read. The colors must have a ratio at least 3:1 for large text, which is around a font size of 24 pixels. And for other size text, it needs to have a contrast ratio of at least 4.5 to 1. So I'm going to demo a couple of those tools that are out there. One of them I created myself, which looks like this. This is the web version. It does exactly what it says on the tin. It checks whether two colors work well together. You can either enter in the hex code of those colors. If you're not sure what the hex code is, you can also enter in just the color name. So if I want to test what black is, enter in black, it will change the color to black. And for my foreground, I'm just going to go with white and keep it simple. And we've got a contrast ratio of 21. So black and white work really well together. They pass all the criteria that's needed. You can save these colors if you wanted to and revisit them in the near future. If you wanted to share this with someone else on your team, you could copy the URL, send it over to that person. When they paste that in, they get to see what you've just seen on your browser. If you wanted to see some content to maybe get more of an idea of how the content will look with these colors, you could put some content in there if you wish to. I also I have turned this into a Chrome extension. So if we go back to the NASA website and close our DevTools, I created a color contrast Chrome extension. So if we click on the tab, it'll open this little window, and it pretty much does the exact same thing as the web version. The biggest difference is that one feature that it has that the web version doesn't is this handy little color picker. So you can go anywhere on the page, click a color, and it will apply it to the extension. Let's pick another color. Let's pick this red. Don't know why I'm picking red. And yeah, it's got a contrast ratio of 2.65, which doesn't work. So yeah, that's me showing off my tool. But like I said, there's a wide variety of tools out there. Another one, which is by an organization that Ady mentioned before, is WebAIM. WebAIM have a dedicated color contrast checker, which I recommend you use. It's really, really good. Does the exact same as what mine does. You can put in you can put in two different colors and check whether they have a good contrast ratio. They also have a dedicated link contrast checker. So links have a different set of criteria than normal text does. So I think WebAIM is the only one of its kind that I've come across that has a contrast checker specific to links. So I highly recommend you check that out as well. So sticking to the whole color theme and vision, another tool that's at your disposal is being able to emulate different vision impairments using either Chrome or Firefox. So for example, if you wanted to emulate what it'd be like to be partially sighted, you can do that. If you wanted to know what it'd be like to see only in black and white, again, you can do that. So if we head back over to the NASA website, let's bring up our DevTools, and let's press these three dots to the right here, hover over more tools, and head to rendering. And if we scroll on a little bit here, we come to this emulate vision deficiency section, and we can emulate different impairments. So we could emulate someone who might have blurred vision and it will partially blur the screen. We could emulate someone who might have achromatopsia, which emulates the page in black and white. So for testing things around color and visual impairments, this is a perfect tool to use. Firefox has a similar setup. So if I open up Firefox, if I right click, they have a dedicated option here where you can open up the accessibility properties. So if I click on that, and under the simulate section, I can do exactly what I just did on Chrome. I can emulate someone who's got achromatopsia, emulating black and white. I can have all loss of contrast. So yeah, these are just really, really handy tools to use when it comes to checking around vision and color. Back to the slides. Another tool that is really handy to use, and it's a piece of software that people use on a regular basis, is screen reader software. This essentially renders text and image content as speech and even in Braille as well. This is software that is actually built into most operating systems. So macOS, for example, has VoiceOver built in. Since Windows 10, I believe there is Narrator, which is built in. And then there's other tools as well out there like JAWS and NVDA. And it's also worth noting as well that it's also worth noting that different screen readers behave differently, kind of like how browsers behave differently. Different screen readers interpret the web a little bit different. So I thought that was worth mentioning. So again, let's try and do a demo. So I've got a new tab here of the NASA website, and I've deliberately blurred the screen just to try and help give you more a bit of an insight as to what it would be like for someone who has some kind of visual impairment and needs to rely on a screen reader to navigate the web. And my task is really simple. I just want to know how many headings there are on this web page. So let's turn on my voiceover.
Voiceover on term 2 Chrome, NASA, Google Chrome Alex, window, heading level 4. NASA events, last heading level 4, last heading level 4, NASA events.
Okay, that's interesting. So according to the screen reader, there is only one heading on this web page.
Voiceover off.
Which is ridiculous. I'm sure there's some content on this web page which I'm sure NASA would feel is important to a user. So if someone is using the screen reader and wants to quickly navigate between important parts of the web page using the headings, they can't do. There's only one area. So that would be something that you would feed back to the engineers saying, look, there's only one heading on this page. There needs to be more. Sort it out. And lastly, I'm not going to do a demo of this one because I'm still trying to get to grips with it myself. It's voice control software, which allows users to navigate the web using voice commands. Again, this is software that is built into some operating systems. Mac has one which is called voice control. And I think one of the popular ones out there that you can also use is called Dragon. So yeah, these are just a few bits of software and tools that I mentioned. But like I said, there's so many more out there to help you try and cover as many accessibility issues as possible. So to kind of summarize, accessibility is for everyone and it should be a part of everything that we do. Making things accessible is morally and lawfully the right thing to do. We all have a part to play in this to make a more accessible web, from content, design, engineer. Everyone has a part to play and we all need to come together. Improving accessibility improves the user experience for everyone, not just for those who have accessibility needs. And by using manual and automated testing together, we can ensure that we are covering as many issues as possible. And again, to try and make a more accessible web. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Alex. It was great to have the demos as well, because I know that's something we get asked for quite often. Yeah. So it's good to see the tools in action. So I think there's been a little bit of conversation throughout your talk in the chat box. I'm not sure there's been specific questions, but I don't know if anyone has any questions that they want to ask.
I mean, a lot of what I covered, there was a lot of like questions with Ady's talk, and yeah. So that's fine.
No, to be fair, I think it was a nice little crossover.
Yeah, it was.
A little bit of foreshadowing as it came about. But yeah, I forgot that. Yeah, the Google Inspect now do that visual impairment stuff. I know I've heard about it, never got to use it, but now it's demonstrated it. It's like, that's amazing. It's like, and that's so good.
And there's more to it. So on Firefox, for example, when I went in the properties for accessibility, I only showed a portion of what was available there. You can even get to get an insight into the entire hierarchy of headings. You can see what links are there. You can, there's so much involved in that one panel that I could have talked about in a whole other talk. It's great to see how far it's come in terms of how many tools are out there.
Exactly.
Definitely. Okay, excellent. Well, if anyone doesn't have any follow-up questions, I think that we are pretty much due to finish on time anyway. I'm just trying to figure out how to, let me have a little look. Perfect. I think we tend to like to just give a little bit of a shout out to our socials as well. So let me just see if I can get back to screen sharing. Let's have a look.
While you're just working that out, I don't have advertisements, so it's not a shameless plug to get money off you. On my website, I've put on in PDF and Word form a document of the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1, and it gives you hints on how to test for each single one. So if Wave's the best thing to use, I put Wave or whatever it might be. Sometimes it's visual inspection, sometimes it's actually using a screen reader, but I go through all the different ones. But just bear in mind, when the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 3 or Silver, they haven't made their mind up yet, comes, going to change a lot of how it does it, and it's more focused on outcomes, and they do things like I've been banging on about for 3 years, which is gaps between buttons. So I use this example of if you've got a shaking disease and you've got 2 buttons really close together, it's very hard for you. But in the days when we used to commute regularly, using your phone on a train, it's a similar situation. So it's useful for me on the train, but it's vital for the person with the shake.
Yeah. I've just posted a link off actually to an article which explains what's happening with the newest version of the accessibility guidelines by the World Wide Web Consortium. It's called Project Silver, but yeah, it's worth a read because it will totally change how people check how accessible a website is. Essentially, there's some big changes coming.
Fabulous. Well, perfect time to kind of plug Slack, because the whole purpose of us having this Slack channel is we want these conversations to continue throughout the month, not just, you know, kind of grind to a halt between each event. So if you are not already signed up, please do get signed up on there, because there's so many conversations that we could be having over there in between meetups, and we do need experienced people like yourself, Alex, and like yourself, Ady, to be on the channel to answer questions. So I think Chris is going to pop in the link into the chat.
Just did.
Apart from that, that is pretty much us. Again, if you're not following on the socials across kind of Twitter, Instagram and Facebook, then please do that as well. And that is us for June's event. Obviously, we'll all be getting our heads together for the next one. And touch wood, as I said at the start, you know, it's not going to be a million miles away for one that we can actually all get to in person as well. That is the dream, hopefully.
Exactly, yeah.
Thank you so much, everyone, for coming along. And we will, I suppose, speak to you all soon.
Thank you, Gabby.
I used to.
Is it today? Stop recording.
Years. Are you not forgetting about this and stuff like that, or just out of curiosity, or have you got events planned for the next few events planned for next few months?
Yeah, we tend to plan ahead a little bit, don't we, kind of, Chris and Ken? So we have a rough idea of what we're looking at. We've not nailed it down yet, but we'll probably make an announcement. And normally it's no longer than like a week after an event for the next one, but we're looking at probably at least a couple more virtual before we can get in person, but we'll play it by ear with the government guidelines.
Yeah,
and see
Carl,
what we're up to.
Yeah, it's like the stuff I miss about being in person is the agile games and like the sort of interaction demonstrations that we can do. I miss them so much. Especially
get back to that, we will definitely.
Yeah, I want to do the API one again. I really do.
Yeah, definitely. But I mean, if there's anything in particular that you're wanting to see, Andy, please do drop us a DM on Slack, or just post it on Slack as well. And, you know, we're happy to tailor events to what people want to see. So keep in touch with us and we'll make sure we do that.
Awesome, thank you. I might send you a message link on LinkedIn, Gabby, in the next few days. Just like to run a few ideas past you as well.
Perfect, that's great. Well, I look forward to having a chat with you. Brilliant.
Awesome.
If no one else has anything to add, we can all get to our evenings, and I'll see you all soon.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Stay safe, everyone.
Bye.